So this is not going to be the most exciting video, but I actually think it's incredibly interesting. We've talked about the frauditor effect a couple of different times on this channel, and every time we see an example of it, it's always when a frauditor is making change that is more restricting than it was before. And this is an excellent example of this. The frauditors in Florida have made such obnoxious nuisances of themselves that we are starting to see more and more restrictions. I hope you enjoy it. I really did. Let's go ahead and get into it.
An ordinance of the City of Apopka, Florida, amending Chapter 42, Miscellaneous Offenses of the City Code of Ordinances by creating Section 42-3, Public Access to City Buildings, providing for recognition that certain areas of city buildings require regulation of public access to provide for the security and privacy of public visitors, city employees, and city officials, and minimize potential disruptions to the work of city government, classifying certain forum areas within the city buildings, authorizing the city administrator or designees to manage public access to city buildings by classifying forum areas and implementing measures to separate forum areas, regulate access, and ensure security and privacy, providing for violations for unauthorized access or disruptive behavior with non-public and limited public forums, prohibiting the unconsenting recording of video or audio within city buildings except during public meetings, providing the authority to issue trespass warnings, providing for codification, severability, conflicts, and an effective date.
Anything left there, Andrew?
I will break it out. That was a perfect summary. It's a great title because it summarizes everything, but nobody understands it, right? And for the record, and Drew Smith, for my partner Andrew Hand, but Drew Smith here tonight from the City Attorney's Office. And just as the title alludes to, what this is doing, it's balancing the public First Amendment interests with the city business interest. And that's what the courts recognize, that while public buildings are public buildings, they are also places of public business. And the city has every right to ensure that the public business is able to be effectively and safely and efficiently performed while the public is still allowed what access we can in that process. And so you heard in the title, you see it on page 2 of the ordinance, page 3 of 6 of the ordinance, excuse me. The real core concept here is the non-public forum and the limited public forum. And in this ordinance, just give you a little bit of background, this has been modeled after Punta Gorda's ordinance, as are many in the state that have been developed recently and are being developed right now to do the same thing we are here, because Punta Gorda's got challenged. They went to court in 2019 on a challenge, and the court upheld it. So that's why that's being put forward by the league as a model, and why many jurisdictions are using it as a model, since it has had that judicial review and has been approved. So you have the non-public forum and the limited public forum. I'll add to that the one that I know you're all familiar with, you've heard before, which is the traditional public forum, your parks, your sidewalks. Traditional public forums are the places where we allow and ensure to allow the most speech. That is where, you may have your person with the megaphone who wants to speak out against this ordinance, for instance, whatever their speech that they want the public to hear and the commission to hear, those are your traditional public fora. We're not talking traditional public fora here. We're not talking about places where speech is really, we try to shoot for unfettered speech. We don't want to limit you in any way. We have to avoid content-based restrictions, and any restrictions we put on speech within traditional public fora have to be narrowly tailored and do no more than we absolutely have to do to protect the public health, safety, welfare. We're not worried with those standards with limited public fora, and certainly not non-public fora. With limited public fora, the courts have said there's a much lower standard, and that's a standard that applies to our lobby spaces. Here in this ordinance, that's our lobby spaces. That's the spaces. This converts to a limited public forum when we're here for a meeting. A conference room may convert to a limited public forum if you're there for a meeting. The public gets those rights that we expect in a limited public forum, the ability to come here and under those rules that the commission has adopted to speak to you. I get to say what I want to say. You don't get to say, Drew, you don't get to say that. We don't like what you have to say. You don't get to say it. You don't get to do that. You don't get to viewpoint discriminate. You have to give me my opportunity, but I have to follow the rules. That's different than the traditional public forum where you don't really get to make many rules about how I speak or what I say. In the limited public forum, you do. On top of the limited public forum, and most spaces in this building by this ordinance will be made non-public fora. Because again, while it is a public building, it is a public building intended for public business. And the business comes first. The 9 to 5 hours when you're here for a meeting, it's about public interaction. But when your staff is in their offices doing their work, they have a right, the courts have recognized they have a right to do that work without the public coming in and interrupting them and distracting them from that work. And this is not a First Amendment audit ordinance. This is broader than that. But First Amendment audits is what has triggered this in a lot of jurisdictions, because you have people coming in to business offices, because city business offices are business offices, and intentionally creating distractions. Not all, but some have. And this is a way of dealing with that. And so by creating those non-public access areas, you are able to create a situation where your employees can say, I don't want to be recorded, because the courts have recognized that right too. All of us as private citizens have it, right? In Florida, you have to get my permission before you record me if I have any expectation of privacy in the space that I am. The courts have said the same applies to an employee of a government, that if they are at their desk and there's an expectation of privacy at that desk, you still have to have their permission to record them. That's what this says. Part of it is, and if you go down to what this is delegating to the city administrator, a lot of that is the signage and making sure everything is appropriately marked so the public knows this is a non-public access area. You have to have permission to get back here, all the things that the ordinance says. One thing that I'll note in the non-public fora that it discusses, and actually really and here when we're in the non-public forum that has, as we're standing here right now, transformed into a limited public forum, there's this concept of legitimate public business. That's coming straight out of that Sheets decision. That's a term that the Punta Gorda used in their ordinance, and the court specifically hinged on. And what they're doing there, and what the court appreciated them doing there, recognized them doing there, was tying the space to the context of use at the time. So, for instance, we're in a limited public forum right now. We all know the rules of the commission meeting. I'm standing here at the podium giving a presentation on this. We're all engaged in the legitimate public purpose for this space at this time. If I went off the rails and I decided I was going to come up and start walking down and lobbying each of you on some other item, not on the agenda tonight, outside of the rules of procedure for this meeting, I might argue that I'm engaged in public business because I'm interacting with my elected official, but at that time, in that space, it's not a legitimate public business. So that term legitimate public business, it's really tying context. What's going on in that space at that time, and is that what's intended? So in this space, that's a good example. To go to the employee offices to give you a different one, legitimate public business, if I'm in the non-public forum area, which as this is set up, I would have to have basically permission to come in and an escort, right? And so if I say, I have a meeting with Gene, and I go and finish my meeting with Gene, I've finished my public business, my legitimate public business. Well, I want to go see the city administrator. So contrary to what staff is asking me to do, I march down to the city administrator's office and start knocking on his door. From my perspective, I'm still engaged in city business, right? I want to talk to the city administrator, but it's no longer legitimate city business because I have now exceeded the scope of what I came into the non-public area to do. Does that kind of make sense to everybody? So those are the big concepts. I talked a little bit on the recording. That's the last one that I really want to touch on. So with recording, obviously, when we are conducting a public meeting, whether in this room or in a conference room, anywhere where a noticed public meeting is being conducted, the public has every right to record video, audio. As long as they're not creating a disruption, they have a right to record public meetings. That's confirmed by state law. Where this restriction on recording comes in, it really is getting back into that outside of those times when we know recording is required, regardless of whether I want to be on camera that night or not. When you're in the offices, when you're in the private spaces, when you're in these non-public fora, then just as a private citizen has the right to do, just as the courts have recognized a governmental employee has the right to do, an employee of the city can say, I do not want to be recorded right now, and you will not be allowed to record it in a non-public forum. And again, that was part of the Sheets case. That was part of the argument. And again, why we're all the cities that we work with, they're all kind of using that as the template for how do we get back to efficiently run government where our employees feel safe and not threatened, because sometimes that's what happens is when you have these incidents occur, people start to feel less safe. And when people start feeling less safe, work starts to get less efficient. So, as I said before I came up here, the policies really are implementation of this. So I know the policies go into more detail, but that's because they're really spelling out for your staff and your administration how do we conduct ourselves within this new system. So if there's any questions about the ordinance or the policies, I'll do my best there. I may, like I said, ask city administrator or chief to chime in if there's any questions they might be better suited to answer.
Any questions?
So my question would be, and I'm going to make reference to the city clerk's office because that's where most some of the visitors come up and they want public records and they start to record, or they actually start to record their transaction or their discussion with the city clerk, and the city clerk expresses, you cannot record. I'm asking you not to record our conversation or to record me in your video. At that point, what would be the action that she can take if the person insists on
Refuses.
recording?
First of all, it would be to progress no further into whatever that meeting was. I will no longer be able to interact with you. And then the next step is it the call coming to your office or to administrator's office is the intention.
So,
But ultimately, it would work its way up the flagpole. And if it got pushed far enough, you would have the trespass warning, as you see in the ordinance and the policy, working its way all the way up to trespass warning, where the person could be trespassed from the building.
so I know that now. I believe that most of the doors have posted no videotaping and no recording. But we're gonna have like more official notices rather than what we have now, at 8.5 by 11 type paper on all the doors.
I was in city of Sanford yesterday, and they still have 8.5 by 11 paper too. So
Yeah,
don't feel
they
bad.
do? Okay. All right. That was my question because it has happened,
Absolutely, yes,
and the staff has expressed not feeling safe in that environment, and they don't want to confront our
correct.
residents. They want to provide the service, but they're providing the service in an uncomfortable situation, and
ma'am.
we don't want that for the employees.
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Anderson?
No, understand it.
Commissioner Smith?
Good.
Commissioner Nesta?
Yeah, and thank you for going through that and describing this. My concern is that the word legitimate, the phrase proper use, who's defining what that means?
Again, that's why I point out that that's really coming from that court case and where it's tying the context of the room, because legitimate is contextual in how it's being used there. And so ultimately your administrator is charged with implementing this, but whether it's not really, in my mind, a discretionary call on whether we're talking legitimate business interest or not when we think of that context that I told you the court was looking at. Because if it's here, we all know what the rules of the commission meeting are. So if I wander up there and start trying to engage each of you individually, we know I've left the legitimate business. It's clear at that point. And again, I use the example with the offices. When I come into the office area with one expectation, with one thing that I've said, I'm here to see so-and-so, that's my legitimate business. And it's not a call that's being made, oh, well, I mean, actually, the call that's probably being made is, do you have an appointment with so-and-so? And if you do, you're going to be led back. It's not, well, we don't think you should meet with so-and-so today. It's simply, do you have an appointment with this person or not? Is this person expecting you? So it's not, I do not expect, nor was it the court's view of that word, that this is something that's going to be arbitrarily or ambiguously even applied, because it's simply looking at why did you say you were here, and have you done that? And if you've completed it, then it's time to go. It's not saying, no, you don't have a good reason for being here. And we're not talking about coming up to the public and the podium and speaking during a public meeting. We're really talking about those areas where there is a high degree of protection of the space. Those non-public forum is really where that legitimate public interest comes into play. And so it's if I'm just wandering the halls of the offices, I might say, "Oh, I'm here to collect evidence for a lawsuit I want to file. That's my legitimate public business." But no, that's not the legitimate public business that got you into the building in the first place. That was the meeting you told us you had that we brought you up to when we met you at the front door.
So, and I understand that within the context of the ordinance itself, I understand what you're saying. It's based on what the Punta Gorda case law provides. My concern is that this can be weaponized because it's ambiguous, and if it can be applied with some ambiguity locally here, then we turn into some issues. I'll give you an example just specifically here is that if somebody wants to come in and look at the artwork that's in our atrium right now, that's not city business.
But that is a limited public forum, and they have every right to be there without an escort. If they wanted to come into this room and do the same thing, though, that would be where I think your analogy fits perfectly.
So, but I guess that's my point, though, is that it's where do we limit? It's
You're
is that limited on here? Is that doesn't state specifically that?
but it does.
Point me
Your
to that.
legitimate public purpose, that's applying to your non-public forum. That's qualifying your non-public forum. And you see that does not apply below to limited public forum. We have not used that legitimate public purpose for those. So if you are in the lobby, my expectation is nobody's going to be asking you why are you in the lobby unless you're doing something disruptive, and then you might be. But if you're just there taking pictures or just looking at the artwork, this allows you to do that. And nobody's making a judgment call in a limited public forum as to whether or not you have a right to be there.
Now, I think this contradicts some of our policy stuff too, and we can discuss that once we just get into the policy side of this, and where there's a lot of issues on that front. But where there can be a lot of ambiguity and a lot of weaponization of this, and that's my biggest concern. Is yes, I want to protect our staff, make sure that they feel comfortable, are proficient in their job, and don't feel attacked in any capacity. That is first and foremost the most important thing. But moving forward, though, is making sure that the exact reason why our staff are here is to serve the residents. So I want to make sure there's nothing that's getting in the way or slowing down that process either, that's letting government move and do and serve the way it should. So, if I'm starting a new business in the city, I need to stop by community development. I need to stop by and get a BTR. I may need to talk to our community development land. I may need to talk to our economic development department. So although I can put that all on every list, it may be, oh shoot, I meant to go to that office today. And now, again, if somebody doesn't like me, they can say, no, that was on a list. You need to go or I'm going to trespass you. So those are my concerns. And I just want to make sure the residents are protected as well as our staff. And if you can point me to kind of where that covers my residents as well as my staff, or the staff and the residents, then I'll understand a little bit better.
I will say, I think that conversation, and not so much as to what it says here, your administrator is going to be the one implementing this. And so if you have a situation where you have members of the public who are being denied access to staff, I think that's a conversation. You're not going to have that problem, I'm sure. That'd be a conversation you're having with their city administrators. Why is this happening? Because I think the expectation and the policy, the expectation is if you're in the offices, you're there for a reason. You're there with an appointment. Is this person expecting you? And if that person's not expecting you, well, then go make an appointment. And that's what gets you in. It is that appointment, that expectation that you're going to be here at the time that you are here. Because if I'm just, and yes, I completely understand the point, and I see it happen at city halls. It's how business has been conducted at a lot of places in Florida up to this point, because we haven't had these problems occur. We have had fairly liberal access to local government employees for a very long time. But if it's, well, I just remember I got to go see the community development director about something. Well, at least can we make sure the community development director is available, or that you're not interrupting? Because if you just go down and knock on the community development director's door and he's 30 minutes into a 2-hour project and he has to stop and even to say, I don't have time for you right now, that may have just wasted that 30 minutes he just finished working. And so it's the competing interest. I don't mean to take away anything that you've said. I'm just kind of trying to lay out the competing interest, because ultimately it's your body's decision as a policy, not mine as a lawyer. I'm just trying to be the best guide I can be.
No, absolutely, and I appreciate that. And again, I want to make sure that this cannot be weaponized, and that should it be in any capacity or that it's used inappropriately, that there's something put in here that if the resident feels that they were unjustly trespassed or something in that capacity,
an appeal process.
Correct. And then also, in addition, there's page 5 of this under additional rule that says additional rules related to the specific functions or use of a city building may be created or implemented by the city administrator. And I think it'd be beneficial to have some language in there that with additional approval of the city council. I think if we're going to keep adding or taking away or adjusting this, which I think it's going to need to be massaged, just how we use and work with our residents, I think having us part of that conversation, also our residents part of that conversation, will be vital to the success of this and ensuring that it's not done improperly.
To that last point, would you have any problem with the consent of the city commission?
Unless it's an emergency type situation.
Well, if it's an emergency, it wouldn't be under this. I mean, you have the power to trespass. I mean, all those other provisions.
Well, I'm thinking like hurricane shelter, that type of thing. That's the type of situation.
Well, and if you're under an emergency declaration, you will have that through your emergency declaration. You will have been granted that additional authority. So I think in a declared emergency, you're going to have it anyway. So I'm comfortable with that. So yeah, I think we could add at line 201 to 202, just add that additional rules with the consent of the city commission, because that's what you have here. That's why you have the policies. That's kind of the same thing that's going on with those. So that's why we have these together.
And I appreciate the massaging there. The real concern of this, again, I want to make sure that our resident or our staff are protected, feel safe, feel confident in their ability to do their job. But I'm also very concerned about it being weaponized. So I appreciate the explanation, and thank you for your time to go through it
Yes, sir.
and explain it to us.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Smith, anything? Good. Commissioner Velasquez, anything additional?
No.
Nope. Okay.
No.
Commissioner Anderson, good? Okay. All right. Anybody from the public wish to speak on this one?
Virginia Street, 2119 Palm Vista Drive. I looked at the policies and regulations that it has been drafted, and I see a lot of black stuff, a lot of black markings. I don't know what that is. You know, it's not complete.
You see, right?
You see what I'm saying here? Under the
The redacted part.
City Hall security protocol.
Security features that explain it.
I think I explained most of that to you all during our meetings. It is security protocol for the building. It's exempt from Chapter 119. That's why it's been redacted. It's how our employees will respond if there's a breach of security in the building, and what numbers they can call and certain things that they can do is exempt from 119, so that the common public doesn't know what our reaction to a threat to the building is going to be.
And sorry to interrupt too. I thought are we discuing the policy separately than this?
Yes.
Yeah, this is separate.
Okay, I just want to make sure because I do.
She brought up the policy.
No,
I'm
I
just
totally
answering her question.
Okay.
Oh,
Mr. I'm sorry. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure because if we are talking about policy, I have a lot of questions about that as well. So
Okay.
absolutely. No, but
Okay. This
ask
is,
whatever and sit. I didn't want to interrupt you by any means.
I thought we were talking about both of them at the same time. I'm sorry. I'll wait.
Okay.
Shall I wait?
Okay. Sure. That'd be
Unless
good.
you have something else specifically
No,
to.
that was all I had about. I didn't understand why some of this was reacted.
Okay. Sure.
Okay.
Anybody else from the public wish to speak on this one? All right. If not, close the public hearing. Look for a motion to approve ordinance number 3081 at first reading and hold over for second reading and adoption.
So moved.
Got a motion by Commissioner Smith,
Second.
second by Commissioner Anderson. All those in favor?
All right.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries.
I'm opposed. I just think this is going to be weaponized. I want my staff to be
4-1
safe, but
with Commissioner Nesta against it. Okay.
okay.
Next up.
I really think this attorney did an amazing job explaining the issues. He didn't focus on the camera because, like I've said before, the camera is not the issue. The camera is secondary. The behavior of these people when they are going into these businesses, when they are going into these buildings, that is the problem. I hope you found this as interesting as I did. Thank you so much for watching, guys. Please like, comment, subscribe. Let me know what else you would like to see, and I will catch you on the next one.